this is a discussion post for Module 4. The answer to the first question that I had found in my readings and the articles and things were the ways that are useful for struggling readers is in our textbook that talked about using syllables and breaking apart the words with the syllables, and some kids were able to do one-syllable words and understand and read them correctly. But when it got down to more than one-syllable words, that is where they struggled with and how to break it down and read that word. So I think we need to teach our kids that when we're reading that we break apart the word and how to correctly break apart the word so that they can read it and understand what the word is saying. That's one way that a strategy that kids use, and that's the strategy I use in my class, is to break it apart and read the parts that you know. For example, I think one was inspector. You break it down with in and then spec and then or in and then spect or what was it, in and then spec and then tor. Just ways that they know that they can break it down to make sense to them. So to me, that's an important strategy and something that kids need to know for struggling readers, especially when they get in the upper grades and you do have those multi-syllable words that they need to be able to break down. The other thing that it talked about was the morphemic, the one where you have to understand the affixes in words, like the prefix and the suffixes, and especially in upper grades, you're going to see more of these words. And so if the kids learn the prefixes and what prefixes mean, and then of course if they learn the suffixes that are the ending on the words and they understand what those mean, then they can figure out the word behind it and understand it. Especially teaching them the root word first. And so if they know these root words, then they can sort of sound out the beginning sounds and ending sounds. But that's another way that kids will learn, is just by being able to break apart those different parts of the word and understanding. So if we teach the kids the different prefixes and the sounds that they make and the endings of the suffixes and the sounds that they make, they should be able to put those together and understand, especially be able to put together and understand the meaning behind it. And then also, of course, the context, just using context clues is a big thing for students who struggle with reading. If they get to that word and they don't understand the word, and this is one thing that I have some of my kids that do a really good job at, and then some of my kids that I'm like, that's something that we need to work on, is we skip the word and see if there's anything else in the sentence that we can apply to understand, to figure out what the word is. And so if they can just use the clues around the word to help them figure out the tricky word, then that's something that they're understanding and they're learning the meaning behind it. So that's a really good way to teach our kids that are struggling, is just using those context clues around the word to figure out the meaning behind that word that they just are not sure of. The last thing that I saw that was not, you can use it but they don't recommend it, is the dictionary. And that's for those words, and it's only for the words that maybe are unknown and it's really crucial in what you're reading in the passage that you're reading, and they really need to know the meaning behind it. So that would be a exception to maybe use a dictionary. But in upper grades, the dictionaries, of course, will have words in the definition with them. But anything below third grade needs to have pictures, and use pictures to give meaning of the words, because our kids are still struggling with reading, so they would have to know how to read a dictionary. And that's something that, to understand a word, they have to understand how to read. So that might be a little bit harder. So having picture dictionaries would be a great thing, a great access to have in your class, just as a last resource to use. I would definitely not implement those on how to figure out words and things like that. I would make sure that was my last resort, and maybe something that they couldn't get my attention, or I was in small group that they could do on their own. But that was some of the things that I found out from the reading in our text, and then also the article that I was reading about the instruction in elementary grades about the morphological analysis in elementary, and then how to teach them and what things that they use and stuff. The second question dealt with vocabulary, and it says the components of ways of effective vocabulary development and for those struggling readers, and what great programs there are out there. And of course it was stated that, I think it was in the what is the academic language article, or it might have been the the video, but I think it was the video of Diane August. She had stated that vocabulary is key to reading comprehension, and that is very true. If you don't have the vocabulary, then the reading comprehension is going to take time. Kids need to have that knowledge and that vocabulary built in them to understand and start understanding reading comprehension. So that's just something that she said that was important, and that we need to make sure that our kids have that vocabulary knowledge, and that some ways that we can build the vocabulary knowledge. And her video was dealing with kids that had that second language, and English was their second language. And she said, our words are hard because we do have multiple meaning words, and they could mean several different things. But one thing that she talked about is just teaching the individual words before a couple of words, and don't throw a ton of words at them at one time. You just want to give them a couple of words. And the words that she talked about that we needed to be focused on are keywords that we will see in reading, and those are like tier 2 words. And then of course our base words like rooms in a house, or furniture, or vegetables, or things like that that students need to know, those foundational words. And then of course words and phrases like adverbs, nearly, slowly, idioms, once upon a time. Things like that that second language learners just are not sure of, and we feel like that's natural. And once upon a time, we feel like we use that at all, but coming from a different language and learning English, they might not understand that idiom behind it, and that meaning, that true meaning behind it. And then she said that we've got to get the kids talking, and when they talk, that's when they're going to learn. And so what she suggested is, of course you give the word and then the definition, but she said you need to include a picture with the definition so that the kids can have a way to understand the meaning behind it by looking at a picture and relating the picture to the meaning. And it says, we give them the word, we give them the definition, and we show them a picture, and then we describe the picture to them. But then have them turn to a partner and describe another picture that relates to that same word, and let them discuss it and see how they can relate that picture to the meaning. So those were some things that were good ideas, and that I've started using, especially in social studies. We have everything that's vocabulary in our room is a definition, the word, and the picture, and we really deal a lot with describing the picture and what's in the picture and how does it relate to the word. I had gone to a vocabulary course and learned lots of ideas to use to incorporate vocabulary in the classroom, and how to get the kids knowledge and how to build the knowledge for them for that vocabulary. And I learned some really cool games, and of course it was with the words and the definitions and the pictures. And it said, give a kid a picture, and give another kid a word, and give another kid a definition, and pass out all the vocabulary cards in the room, and just have them go match their vocabulary word or their definition to the picture and things like that, or have them have the picture of the vocabulary word, and then they have to describe what they have, and the partner has to guess the vocabulary word. So those are just some great vocabulary building skills that kids can do. And then some other things that I had read and looked at were just strategies to learn vocabulary and build that vocabulary is that we pick words that are keywords to the story. We're not going to give words that they don't really need to know or that have no, I guess you could say, really true meaning to the passage. We want to pick out those key ones that they really need to understand the passage. And but they have to have, they said in upper grade, they'll use these keywords, but then they'll have sentences that they form with these keywords, so to see if they understand their new word that they learned and see if they can use it correctly in a sentence. But when I was reading the article about the academic language, Graves had mentioned that, there's different ways that we can use vocabulary in our and different strategies that we can do when it comes to teaching vocabulary. And he said, those cognate words, and those are words that are almost the same, or I'm sorry, not that one. Graves had stated that we can compare words in text that your students are reading to words on existing word lists that we have. And we can see, okay, what words do they know? And this is the way to figure out what gaps they have in their vocabulary. So what words that you are reading in your text do you know, and words that you might have already, do you really know those? And it gives you an idea of what you might need to teach and what words you might need to pull maybe for that next reading unit. And also another thing was, it says teachers can construct words tests from upcoming reading selections. So they can go into the text and identify words that they know that maybe are going to be unknown to the kids and that really are crucial to that passage, and use those to see, or even have the kids go into the passage and pick out words that they might not know and let the teacher teach from that as well. And then another thing that Grace had said is just ask questions about words that you may teach. Does it represent, the questions that you need to ask is, does it represent as something that's very important, a certain concept that students need to know in that selection that they're reading? And if it does, then yes, it needs to be taught. But if it does not represent something that's important or a concept that's important in that reading, then it's something that I wouldn't harp on to really make sure that my kids are understanding. So there are just different things that you can do with vocabulary and just trying to figure out a better way to have our students grasp. But I know that the key to comprehension is just having that strong vocabulary, and we need to make sure that we incorporate and teach that to our kids and how to build their vocabulary, but not but we don't want to overwhelm them. So I would, just suggest a couple words a time before passages and stuff, but not give them a ton of words, because then you're going to overload them. So those were some things that I picked up from Module 4's readings. Thanks.